Hey guys, I'm 47 and male. I've been on here for quite some time now, though I'm not popular or anything, as I usually just come to read and get entertained by other people. Today, though, is quite different. I normally come across Am I the A-hole stories when I come on here, and well, today I do have one of my own. And I'd really appreciate some feedback as I'm pretty torn. Please excuse me if I trigger anybody, so here it goes. I'd firstly like to know if I am the a-hole for taking my daughter's trust fund and giving it to my stepson instead. Before you answer this, my story, well, let me explain of how this came to be. I was once married to Carlene, and we've met as teens, and I was honestly the first to fall, but once I asked her out and we got things going, it was perfect from there on. She was everything a man could want in a woman. Smart, sexy, loving, and just a beast in bed. Once I've gotten hold of my family business, I made sure to propose to her and it went great. She accepted and we were pretty much happily married 2 months later. Our relationship was the rare type. We almost never argued and everything just felt so complete. The only issue I had that I never really spoke about was that she was quite the spender. She loved to shop even for things she would never use. Still, as a man making good money, this wasn't much of a problem. Our relationship seemed to be even more perfect when we were gifted with our daughter Bella, who's now 23 years old. Anyways, all was well until a few years ago. I began feeling aches and pains for a good few months. As a man, I didn't really care, but after fainting in the office, I decided I need to get checked. I was shocked to learn that I have cancer. I was devastated and I learned that I would need to start treatment within a few days or it could spiral out of control pretty quick. It was a short time span to get over the shock and make the decision, and it was very violent cancer, so the treatment was also quite pricey. The day I sat my wife down once our daughter wasn't present and I told her, she cried and asked all the necessary questions. She was supportive, and once treatment began, I eventually told our daughter. For the first few months, everything was good. They were supportive, loving the same old wife and child, but as the treatment got more intense and cancer became more violent, I began eventually unable to work at my company anymore. Without me, the business was quickly falling and failing. Plus, I had to be taking large sums of money to pay for the treatment. Eventually, I had to tell my family about this, and at first my wife seemed okay, but once the money started dwindling and she was unable to do activities she once used to, the woman I thought I knew became a whole different person. So, we end up always arguing and she wasn't present most of the time, and this only got worse when bankruptcy arrived. My daughter also changed, and it was only that I realized that I've spoiled her with my wealth. And once it was gone, she no longer uses me for anything. While I stood there fighting cancer, which only seemed to get worse, I was also fighting for my family, but when I had to switch to a different treatment method that had been developed and was said to be more effective, I requested my wife's help just to pay for it from her savings, and that's when everything ended. She told me she couldn't be bothered, that I should just die instead of destroying her life, and just a bunch of nasty things. It was also then that she requested a divorce, also telling me that she's been cheating with my past business rival, as he's had more money and at least he wasn't dying. I tried talking to my daughter, but she was also abandoning me, alongside her mother, saying also cruel things and even wishing death upon me, saying how she was embarrassed to be known as the girl whose dad was bankrupt and dying from cancer. She also made it clear that her new daddy was now my business rival, clearly stating I should forget about her and forget where we were ever related. Basically, no contact, cutting ties. So yeah, that's pretty much how my perfect life crumbled before me. Well, I did manage to get a loan from a close friend who learned about my situation, and thankfully, the new treatment worked. There were scary moments, but I recovered. During that recovery, I had a primary caregiver. Her name was Tia. She was there for me in my darkest of hours, and it was very hard not to fall. After recover, I eventually went back to the hospital and invited her to a date, which she accepted, and everything went up from there. A few months later, we were dating for a year and we got married. She knew my story and she absolutely hated my ex-family. Using her savings, she assisted me in building my business back from scratch. With the right drive, experience, and support, this wasn't hard. Years later, which is now current time, I'm healthy. Well, healthier, happier, and richer than I've ever been. Now, this is where the issue comes into play. So, my current wife, Tia, has a son, Javon. He's a smart boy, and I've spoken with him from the moment I began dating his mother, and we have come to an agreement. Once I and Tia got serious, I eventually began building a relationship with Javon, as he never had a father. His dad passed before he could even walk, so I quickly filled the role. Plus, I surprisingly enjoyed having a son more than I ever did having a daughter. We did a lot together, and from that, his potential was pretty clear. A week ago, I checked my daughter's social media like I usually do since, well, they'd cut all contact with me. From the social media postings, I learned that my daughter was getting married, and the one who would walk her down the aisle would be her stepfather. Still, that didn't hurt as much as what she wrote. She made it seem as if I was never part of her life, as if I'd abandoned her and her mom completely, making herself the victim. It honestly just broke my heart to know something so huge was happening in her life, and she didn't even care to even let me know. Instead, she chose to crap on me and all that I've done as a father for her throughout the years. After learning this, I finally realized that I've been holding on to wasted sentiments. So I decided to take the trust fund I'd originally made for her, and I gave it to my stepson Javon. After all, why should I still allow her to have it when she obviously didn't appreciate anything I did? Plus, all she would do was waste it on meaningless things anyways, so I gave it to my stepson who I knew would make good use of it. After all, he was already pretty darn good at business, so he was very likely to scale the value, and this is why I ask, am I the a-hole for doing that, or if I did the right thing? What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. So this is a very sticky situation that we're in. His family gives up on him when he needed them the most, so at this point, no, I don't blame him for giving up that money. But let's jump into update 1 and see exactly what's happening next. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for daily videos, and let's hop into update number 1. Hey, I must say wow. Like, I'd expected feedback, but honestly, not as much as I got. It's truly surprising. Still, I'm grateful as it's really eased my mind to know you think I did the right thing, especially with how these last few weeks have gone so far. Quite a few of you, though, need to know about the update, and there's things that's happened, and I'm not entirely sure where to start. As you know from my previous post, I've given the trust fund I've made for my daughter to my stepson. I may have not noted it, but I didn't tell my daughter of this, as just as she decided to cut me out of her life like I never existed, I decided that she would find out about what I did whenever she happened to. Well, that time ended up being a week ago, and since then, things have been quite chaotic. So, my daughter got married last week, and it seems her marriage wasn't all that it had seemed. When I had made the trust fund, one of the clauses was that to gain access to it, she needs to be married. So, I guess once she got married, she was reminded of the fund and decided to try to access it, and that was when she learned it no longer existed. I was at my office when she showed up. It was quite a shock, because with how she had treated me the last few years, I didn't know she had my location. It was laughable, but as she stormed into my office, demanding like a mad woman to see me, my secretary stopped her. Well, she said a lot of nasty things, pointing out especially that she was the boss's daughter, and even threatening that she had them fired if they didn't let her through. It was hilarious, but still, I couldn't have her making a scene and causing bad problems in the business, so I went down, and when she saw me, she immediately reverted to her little princess attitude. If I'd forgotten the past few years, I would never have seen the difference between her now and the daughter I used to love. Still, I didn't forget, so I coldly told her that if she did not remove herself from the premises and make a proper appointment, she would find herself being thrown out by security, and if she further caused a ruckus, then it would be the police being called next. It was very cold of me to do, but after so many years of feeling this hurt deep down that I felt, I did not intend to make everything go easy. She had cursed up a storm, accusing me of all kinds of things, but I'd called security and made it clear that I wasn't joking with my threat. This slowly but surely got her under control, and she left and she made the appointment. I'd made sure to extend the date as much as possible just to purposely spite her. Our meetings will be tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to what will happen. I'd be sure to update you guys on the situation. Update number 2. So, as I'd said, I'd update you guys on my meeting with the daughter. Well, it happened, and it went quite interesting. So here's a little recap. I went in that morning and went through my schedule, and I'd made sure to schedule her as the last person I'd meet for the day. So I did all my meetings and greetings, and when it finally came to her time, I made sure she had to wait 15 minutes after the time. I'd watched her be an agitated, annoyed mess that whole time, and I found it hilarious. Still, what was even funnier was the moment I walked in. She didn't even ask if I was okay. Instead, she jumped up and said, "Daddy, I didn't know you had a new company. Wow, it's so big. And you have so many people working for you. You must be rich. Meaning, I can finally buy that car I always wanted." Well, I almost died. Like, I seriously could not believe I'd raised such a daughter. Looking at her fawning over a company after everything she did just absolutely stunned me. No apology, just straight to the materialistic aspect. I don't know, but it hurt. Yet at the same time, I'd felt pleased by her attitude, as it made treating her the way I was about to, so much more justifiable. I allowed her to chat animatedly like a dumb blonde for a good 5 minutes before I suddenly just cut her off. I asked her why she was here, and it seemed that she was here when it clicked to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, Daddy, I came to ask about the trust fund. I tried accessing it, and they told me it wasn't there. I thought it was completely gone, but after coming here, I realized you must have taken it back, so maybe you could upgrade it to a more valuable one." The fact that she was absolutely this delusional, and entitled, told me I was not wrong in taking the fund and giving it to my stepson. Still, I could not stand her having such delusional thoughts, so I had to pour ice-cold water on her and say this: "No, you were right the first time. The fund is not accessible because it's gone." She had asked what I meant, and that's when I reminded her of all that she's done and told her I'd given the trust to someone more deserving of it. Well, she exploded. "What do you mean you've given my trust fund to someone else, you crazy old man? I'm your daughter. How could you do this to your daughter? I need the money." She was practically sobbing as she screamed stuff like this, but I just watched her having her little temper tantrum, watching the levels of entitlement that she had toward things. It wasn't that funny anymore. Instead, it was just pure sickening. In that entitled woman, I tried to see beyond just to see the little girl I once knew and loved, but she was nowhere in sight. She tried to demand that I return it, or at least give her another, but I made it clear I'd do no such thing. Well, that was when she had a true mental breakdown, during which she had screamed and trashed my office, demanding to know who was more worthy than my own daughter, and I felt the urge to tell her. Just as she's chosen her stepfather over me, I've now chosen my stepson over her. So I told her it was given to my stepson and I thought she was violent before, but she only grew worse, throwing things at me and screaming profanities, along with other things that she had a complete mental lapse. I grew panicked when she almost stabbed me with a letter opener, so I got security to come to get her, concerned for my safety, of course. Still, even then, that wasn't enough to get rid of her, and eventually, after she hurt 2 more employees, I called the cops and gave her to them. I allowed them to take a report and also log all the damages that she did. Her face was a picture of disbelief the whole time, but I would make her accountable for her behavior, even if it meant jail time. She needed to learn. Returning home that day, I told everything to my wife and watched her first worry and then laugh hysterically as I recounted everything, imitating the snobby brat that made my day. Javon thought it was more concerning after learning about it, and he'd always felt like even after everything, my daughter was still my daughter biologically, so he felt almost like an imposter. Still, I reassured him he was not imposing in any way. I made it clear that throughout this whole thing, he's been more of a son to me than my daughter ever has been a daughter. So, yeah, this is pretty much what happened. I know this is likely not to end here, but rest assured, I will keep you updated. Update number 3. So, as promised, here's another update of my situation. It's pretty short, but yeah. So after the whole incident went down, I was contacted early the next day by an irate Carlene. Similar to her daughter, she had cursed me out for sending our daughter to jail, saying how I was being unreasonable and how I was cruel, accusing me that I've done it out of spite. She even threatened to sue me for all that I did. Still, I knew that was but empty threats. After all, she would have heck winning the case after what she's done. Though, the most, how I would say, amusing part was when she began making these demands that I bail our daughter out and withdrew the statement I made to make her liable for damages. Along with that, she wants me to return the trust with more value than it originally had, saying how even after everything I was now a healthy man and wealthy one too, so I needed to do my responsibility as a father. This absolute level of entitlement left me a bit speechless, and it was just bizarre to me, but it also showed me exactly why my daughter ended up the way she was. Anyways, I told her that I would do no such thing. I told her I would not return the trust, nor would I release the daughter of liabilities, since she had injured 2 of my employees, and finally, I told her that now that my daughter's 21 and married, she's no longer my responsibility. In fact, I've lost all responsibility for her the moment she took her stepdad's surname and removed mine. I knew she was shocked when I revealed that piece of information because she likely thought I didn't even know. Anyways, after that, I ended up the call and blocked her. So, hopefully, they don't come pestering me again. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I just want you to know, update number 4 is coming out, and it was quite some time for this update to be released. I hope you guys are enjoying this story so far. Let's jump into update 4 and see what the heck's going on now. Hey guys. So, I know it's been a while since I've last updated on my situation, but my hands have been quite full with a multitude of things good and bad. This one will be long, so grab your popcorn and your favorite beverage. You're probably going to need it. Anyways, so after that call from my ex-wife, I've gotten news that my daughter got bailed out by her husband. From what I understood, he was less than pleased. He was apparently a law student, so he was pretty knowledgeable on legal stuff. I was given a date for the hearing where she would pay the fine to me and the employees hurt during the altercation. That hearing was a few weeks ago. I was honestly surprised when I learned that their lawyer would be her husband. Like, I expected more from them. They knew I was likely coming with someone good, so I thought my rival dearest would pay for the best of the best, just to make sure my ex-wife and his stepdaughter won the case, but seemed I had missed something. Anyways, just as I thought would happen, they lost. She was ordered to pay a fine of $3,000 for damages she did to my office, and a little over $7,000 each to the employees after the injuries they sustained. They tried pleading, but it was a failure. In the meantime, I also requested to have a restraining order against them both, as I felt after witnessing the psychotic break she went through at my office, she wasn't exactly safe to have around. Within a few days, I had it so they weren't allowed to come within 500 meters of me, my company, my wife, or my stepson, for a minimum of 2 years. Oh, I thought that was the end of everything, until my stepson told me that he had been receiving a bunch of harassment messages from random accounts online. It ranged from racist attacks to just pure harassment, and the worst were death threats. I knew that with the timing it had to involve my wife or daughter, but I would need to prove it. Still, only a little bit after my wife encountered an attack while coming home from work. Sadly, it was in the blind spot of the CCTV, so we had no way of identifying since he was also masked. I had it reported and had to make my wife take leave from work while it was being investigated. While all this was happening, I decided to investigate my ex-wife's situation, but it was hard to get any info. Though, while gathering info, the investigator did pick up on some suspicious movement, so he followed them for some days. This turned out to be one heck of a decision. My stepson had left home that day and was at the local library. He had a habit of staying there until closing time, so oftentimes he'd be the only one aside from the little librarian. That turned out to be where my investigator had rung me up and told me he noticed suspicious movement. My daughter, ex-wife, were spotted in 2 cars following my stepson, and they'd apparently parked a few cars down. I kept getting updates from the investigator during the evening, and he said that they were just watching my stepson's car from their car, seeming to have no intention of leaving. I had ordered him to keep a close eye as I felt something bad was going to happen. He had suggested we call the cops, but we decided to wait it out, but I still told my stepson of the situation, so he was aware. By the time he left the library, he was being tailed from a distance by both cars, which the investigator noted were both unmarked, and this was when I decided to involve the cops. I'd requested that they drive with private vehicles instead of regular cops, as I felt that would alert them and make them not follow through with whatever they were planning. Still, it did not take long for their plan to unfurl. From what I was told by the investigator, their plan had begun once they had hit the long stretch of road where there was nothing but trenches and forest on either side of the road. They had attempted to slam into his car to run him off the road into a pretty deep trench that would have surely resulted in injuries if lucky, and possible death if not. But he was prepared and he swerved them, which resulted in my daughter's car barely avoiding the trench and slamming into a tree. That's when the cops revealed themselves, and my ex-wife had fled the scene, leaving my daughter behind. From hitting the tree, she passed out, and she was not longer in trouble to arrest. Well, anyways, after that attempt, the investigation that followed was swift. I made sure to provide them with harassment and death threats to my stepson that he got, which once they dug into them, they were able to tie it back to my daughter using her IP address. They also managed to tie the attack on my wife back to my ex-wife. Everything was swift and falling into place. The only delay was that my ex-wife could not be found. From what I learned, there was a break-in at her husband's house the same night, and he was missing a large sum of money. The primary suspect? Yeah, you guessed it. My ex-wife. So now she wasn't only being hunted for attempted murder, but also theft, felony level. The case of my daughter went by quickly. Once again, her husband was the one to represent her, but the poor thing failed miserably. Her sentencing was swift, but it was significantly lesser than it would have been since she testified and gave proof that her mother was also an accomplice, which would make sentencing her once she was caught so much easier. Anyways, that was pretty much what occurred at this time. I kind of feel bad, a bit of regrets, and, well, things ended this way, but I think accountability is one of the best teachers, and jail, well, will surely teach her that. If my ex-wife shows up, I'll update you, and if no news, then I guess we can consider this the end. Thank you everybody for all your comments and help. What's up guys, Mr. Reddito here. So guess what? It took some time, but that was not the final update. There's one more juicy update we're going to hop in now. If you want to support the channel, make sure you subscribe and smash that like button. Here is your final update of this wild story. So, I got the news. It was not what I expected, but I finally understand why this whole thing started and why it went the way it did. So, I learned that my rival, who was also my ex-wife and now husband, had gone bankrupt for some quite time ago, which meant they had debt collectors hunting them down, and were an immediate threat of losing the lavish lifestyle they once used to live. This was pretty much the reason why my daughter had gotten married in such a hurry. The plan was for her to get married and then access the trust, which would then be used to maintain their lifestyle and either pay off their debts or escape the debt collectors. So, when the trust was found to be no more, they basically grew desperate as their plan was pretty much crumbling in real time. And that led to them doing all that they did. They were basically cornered animals, as if they mainly had the large debts they failed to be repaid. They would essentially end up homeless and broke. Their being broke and was also another reason why they could not afford to get an actual attorney to fight the case. Now that that's aside from the break-in that had occurred at my rival's house the same night, my stepson was almost run off the road. It was confirmed indeed to be my ex-wife, and it seems she had found out about a sum of money that her husband stashed away. This money was suspected to be used to run off to some third-world country so that he could avoid debt collectors and still maintain a lifestyle of lavishness to some degree. But she'd taken every penny of it, and that led to the news we got. Allegedly, a call of a woman being found in a motel room, beaten within an inch of her life, was made to a police station, and she was later found to have been that beaten woman. The CCTV footage confirmed her husband was the one to do it, as it seemed in a short time she had run off. She spent, well, a nice little chunk of most of the money, and her husband had hunted her down and found her before the cops could, then knocked her out and ran away with the remaining money. So right now she's in a hospital being treated for her injuries. I decided to pay for the treatment, as while I wanted them to suffer after what they did, I still did not wish death upon them, the way that they've done to me. My daughter also met quite an unfortunate fate while in jail. Apparently, she went in there with the same snobby, entitled attitude and had her butt handed to her multiple times. I honestly felt my heart sing when I went to go see her in intensive care, as even after everything, she was still my baby girl. Seeing her swollen and bruised face pained me, but I still paid for the rest of the care that she could get and the best possible doctors, and they're pretty much both recovering. But as for my rival, he can't be found anywhere. Disappeared like a ghost. So the investigation that was launched just seems painfully stagnant. Still, I don't care much about that. My daughter, similar to me, was served divorce papers the minute she somewhat recovered from her attack. And I guess it was just karma doing karma. And that was pretty much her fate. My ex-wife had tried to prolong her recovery to make sure she did not get sent to jail. But it only lasted for so long before the system got fed up and she was dragged to court and served her sentence. My daughter, well, she was also placed in a jail a bit less violent than the last upon request of mine. It took me some strings to be pulled, but at least I felt somewhat at ease, as my goal was to teach her a lesson not to kill her. Thanks to everyone who followed along with this crazy experience, but yeah, I guess I'm not the a-hole.